Hello there, I'm Jeremy, one of the technical support engineers out of the IAI Schaumburg office, and today I will be covering a demonstration of the ELECYLINDER with digital speed controller product that we came up with earlier this year. I should note that everything discussed in this video is current as of September 1st, 2020. Future firmware updates may change or add to the information that we have regarding these digital speed control units. So the first thing to note is if you're powering up your ELECYLINDER for the first time, the digital speed controller will power up at the same time. It goes through a series of reboot screens. The first one shows you what firmware version you have. So you saw we had firmware version 1.1 on this particular unit. That is current as of April 2020. Now, just a few basics about the EC product. First and foremost, it can be found on any of our 24-volt ball screw slider types, so any ELECYLINDER that's like this one right over here, and our 24-volt non-mini rod type ELECYLINDERs all have this particular option available. You can't find it on our 200-volt servos, you can't find it on our rotaries or the stopper cylinders or the minis or the belt types. Just another thing to note, on our size 3 and size 4 slider types and rod types, so that would be the slider types that are this size, when you have to choose the motor direction, the motor exit direction, the screen will actually follow the direction of the motor. So as this whole section flips, so will the digital speed controller. Thus, if you specify the motor on top option like this one has, your digital speed controller will be on top. If you specify your motor on either side, on left or right, your digital speed control will be to the left or right of your actuator. Most importantly, if you specify the motor on bottom option for the size 3 or size 4 rod types or slider types, your digital speed controller will actually be below your actuator, which is a little bit awkward, but that's how it works. You can see it's been about 2 minutes since I touched the digital speed controller, so it went to sleep. Touching any of the buttons will wake it up, but I'll get to that in just a bit. One other thing to note is if you have a reverse motor ELECYLINDER, the size 3 and size 4 ECs will have the digital speed control on the side of the motor. So if you specify motor left, the digital speed control will be on the left of the actuator. If you specify motor right, the digital speed controller will be on the right of the actuator. The size 6 and size 7 reverse motor types will have the digital speed controller up on the top. The size of the digital speed controller will remain the same no matter what size product you have. So what you see here is the size of the digital speed controller for any of our products. So just as a brief overview of the different buttons and their functionality, this button here is the power and display change button. This button here is the enter button, and then that is the up button, the down button, the left button, and the right button over here. The functionality of those different buttons will change depending on what screen you are looking at. So let's actually get to some basic functionality. Like I said, touching any button will wake the display up. Taking a look, when you first boot up, you will see this screen here, this initial menu. Your two options are simple velocity setting and detailed velocity setting, which is AVD setting. Most people are familiar with the AVD setting. So you can see the yellow highlighted one is the option that you are currently selecting. You can scroll up and down with your up and down buttons to select which one you want. The left and right buttons have no functionality with this particular screen. Once you have made a selection, push the enter button and your screen will change. So this is the screen that most people will be familiar with, and in fact, if you have an older version, if you have firmware version 1 of the digital speed control firmware, this is the screen that you will see immediately after boot up. You can see that you have percentage, AVD, and then you've got F and B. So this is settings of acceleration, velocity, and deceleration for your forward position and your backward position. To select which one you want to change, hit your left or right buttons. So you can see hitting either of those buttons results in a yellow cursor showing up. You can use the left and right buttons to scroll through which value you wish to change. Once you have gotten to the value that you want to change, select the enter button. The cursor will disappear, but you will note that the value is flashing. So you can use your up and down buttons to set the value that you want. If you do not wish to make a change or you wish to put it back, you can push the display change power button and it will revert to the value that it had before. But if you actually do wish to make a change, you can use the up and down buttons to change the value. When you are satisfied with the value that you have selected, you can push enter. And then you may continue scrolling through at any time using the left and right buttons. This change is now automatically implemented into your positions moving forward. Now, as for turning the power on and turning the power off, you do not have to turn on and off the power to the ELECYLINDER to turn on and off your digital speed control power. You just need to long press the power button. You can see now the power is off to the digital speed controller, but the power is not off to the ELECYLINDER. You can see the little green LED over here by the 24-volt power supply shows that I have not gotten rid of the power, the 24-volt power. You want to turn the digital speed control back on, just hit the power button again. And it'll go through its normal boot up screens. And this time I'll show you what the simple velocity setting does. So we'll scroll up and hit enter. So this is something new with version 1.1 of the firmware. You can see that you see simple velocity setting, level, forward, backward, and the values there are 9 and 10. This is another one where you scroll with the up and down button, and once you find the value that you want to change, you hit enter. The value will start flashing again, and again you can hit up and down to change the value, or if you don't want to actually make a change, hit the power button and it'll go back to the value that it was, and it will take you to this screen here. We're going to ignore that for the moment, and we're going to go back. So if you want to go back to this screen, you just hit the display change button again. Now, the unit for the values over here is 10%. So every single change, when I go from 9 to 10, I'm increasing my velocity by 10%. I'm going from 90% to 100% velocity. The only thing that you can change here is the velocity. You're not changing the acceleration and the deceleration, and you can only change it in increments of 10%. So if I have 1, I'm at 10% velocity. If I have 2, I'm at 20% velocity, and so on and so forth, up to 10, which is 100% velocity. I cannot make fine-tooth changes like going from 90 to 91. I can only go from 90 to 100. Anyway, selecting the display change button from either the simple velocity setting or from the AVD setting will give me this screen over here, which says test op mode. To get into test op mode, it says long press the up button. So if we do that, the digital speed controller will give a very loud beep, and it will take us to this screen over here, which is test run. You can see pushing the up button will take you to your forward position, pushing your down button will take you to your backward position, and it does display where your actuator currently is. So you will see that I am currently at 150.09, which is, exactly where I expect to be. I am fully stroked out. So if I select the back button, you will now note my actuator has gone to its back position, which in this case is 0. If I hit the up button, I go to my fully extended position, which is 150. Now, the reason that it's going to 0 and 150 is in fact because those are the two values that are set in there. It won't go straight from one end of the stroke to the other end of the stroke. It will actually go to whatever values you currently have specified as your positions. Now, one thing that I will point out with this is with the EC digital speed controller, you can't set pushing or pulling moves, but you can run them. So for example, if I had specified my backwards move as a pull move, I can still do a test run of that particular move. I will say, as far as operating the actuator goes, this is your only option. You cannot have continuous operation using the digital speed controller unless you yourself are constantly pushing these buttons. The digital speed controller is for testing and setting purposes only, not for continuous operation. So that is the first screen under the test op mode. If we want to keep going forward, we hit the display change button, and that takes us to the next screen, which is position set. However, if I accidentally scroll over that particular screen that I'm looking for, and I don't want to have to scroll through all the positions in one direction, I can hit my display change button and my left button at the same time, and it will take me back to the previous screen. So that's very helpful. But we've already discussed the test run screen, so let's do the position set screen. So you can see, the backwards position I can set using my left arrow. The front end position I can set using my right arrow. Again, keep in mind I cannot set push moves or pull moves. So whatever value is currently here, which in this case is 0.00, that's the value that's currently set for my backward position. If I click my left button, then I am setting my value to that. If I am clicking my right button, you can see that it's 150. If I want to change that, you hit enter, and you can see the cursor pops up, and you can scroll through with the left and right buttons to change a digit value. Now you can note we do have options to change beyond the normal stroke, but I would not do that if I were you. So let's say that I wanted to change this to 125. I would do that, then I would scroll over here, and I can change that to 125, and I press enter, and now my front position, my forward position is 125. Let's say that I want to change my back position. Again, you hit enter to select, and we'll change that to 10. So I actually have to do that, and then I scroll over here and hit 1. So now my back position is 10. Select enter. Now, if I go back to my test run and I go backward, I'm at 10. If I go forward, well, I took my finger off a fraction of a second too soon and I'm at 124.99, but same basic idea. Forward, backward. Alright, so that's those two screens. So this is how you can set your position by typing in values. Over here we have the jogging feature. So you can jog forward, you can jog backward. One thing to note about the jogging feature, it starts out by incrementing in 0.01 millimeter increments, and it starts then moving at 0.01 millimeters per second, going up to 100 millimeters per second. So every time you jog, it will look like this. And the same thing applies when you're jogging backwards. And again, you will note that this is jogging through the full length of the stroke, basically no matter what your positions are. And like I said, there is no way to change this particular way that the jogging feature works. So that's jogging forward, backward. Then you have brake, release, lock, servo, on, off. So if I want to, well, this particular actuator does not have a brake. If I wanted to release my brake, I would hit the down button. It will take me to this screen which says release the brake. If I want to not release the brake, then I just hit the display change power button. And it takes me back, well, it takes me to the next screen. So I'm actually going to go back to this screen. But if I actually do want to release the brake, then I hit enter. And now you can see, because I have released the brake, that arrow is flashing. So before, when the lock arrow was flashing, that was because the brake was in the lock position. I can also turn my servo on and off from here. So right now my servo is on, and I can turn it off by hitting the right arrow button. Now I can move my actuator forward and backward, even if I had a brake. Now, why is this important? Because, as we already saw, the next screen is teach position. So, as I am moving my actuator forward and backward, you will note that it is keeping exact track of my position. If I wanted to teach this location as one of my positions, I can select the backward position or the forward position. If I want to teach this as either position, I have to click enter, and I will teach this value, right, which in this case is 54.04. I will teach that instead of whatever value I had in my position previously. So if I hit enter, now 54.04 is my forward position. Going past teaching position, now we are in now we have another screen which says test op mode. We can exit test op mode by hitting the down arrow. And that takes us back to whichever screen we started with, either the simple velocity set or the AVD set. However, I actually want to go back to test op mode. So now I can show you that when I go to my forward position, it is now 54.04. But let's actually scroll backward. And you can see, if we go backward, we have simple velocity setting even here in test op mode. Again, if I had the AVD setting, it would also show up here. The only difference is that little icon in the corner which shows that you're in test op mode. As far as I've noticed, there isn't any functional difference between doing the simple velocity setting or the AVD setting in test op mode in comparison to doing it in non-test op mode. So that's just another point of fact. Now, so that's simple velocity setting, that's AVD setting, and that's everything that's covered in test op mode. But there is another mode that you can get to called setting mode. To get to it, you can either cycle power to your EC as a whole or turn off power to your ELECYLINDER, to your digital speed controller only. As you hit power, you want to also be pressing and holding down the enter button. So when you do that, it will take you to a completely different screen. You will see now we have environment settings. So you can select left for Japanese, which I don't think is going to come up very often, or you can select right for English. If you happen to get an EC where the standard display was already in Japanese, do not fear. If you turn the power on while hitting enter, it'll take you to this screen over here. All you have to do to get English is just push the right button. You can also adjust screen brightness by pushing the up and down buttons. So you can see as I push down, the screen gets duller and duller. As I push up, the screen gets brighter and brighter. There are a few other features in this particular mode. Hitting the display change, starting with version 1.1 of the firmware, will give you volume control. You may have noticed that this digital speed controller has been beeping loudly at various points during this recording. I can change the volume by pushing up and down, which is probably a relief to some people. Like I said, this particular feature starts with firmware version 1.1 of the digital speed controller. For people with version 1.0 of the digital speed controller, pushing the display change button from the environment, brightness, and language settings screen will take you here. This is the password settings screen. You can see you have 4 digits that you can control. The highlighted digit is the one that you will be changing. You can scroll between digits using the left and right buttons, and you can change the value by hitting the up and down buttons. So I am setting my password to 1234. When I do this, that means that certain features will become locked unless I type in this password. Those features are the simple velocity setting, the AVD setting, the position setting, the teach position, and the password setting itself, which in that case would become changing the password as opposed to setting a password brand new. So once I hit enter, that password automatically takes effect. Now you will note, even though I adjusted the volume, that volume change doesn't take effect until I hit the power button. Hitting enter, by the way, on the password protection screen takes you back to whatever your initial menu is. So if I try to go to simple velocity setting and I select a value and I hit enter, you will note that I now have to enter my password. And once I hit my password, then the value starts blinking and I can change it. Once I have already input my value, I do not have to do so again on the same screen. However, if I go to test op mode, first of all, test run is also not controlled by password. So I can still move forward, move backward, even without inputting my password. Because that's operation, that's not actually changing any of the fundamentals of where my positions are or how fast I am going. But if I go to my next screen, which is my position setting, and I want to change my forward end position, again, I have to set my I have to put in my password. If my password is incorrect, so you'll note I put in 1134 instead of 1234. Well, okay, I was supposed to hit enter there. But if I put in the incorrect password and I hit enter, it says password error. And it takes me right back to this screen, and it won't let me do the change until I input the correct password. And now I can go in and I can change my position back to whatever I want to. And if I wanted to change my backward position, I have to input my password again. Please remember what the value is that you specify for your password. That is very important. Jogging is not controlled by the password, again, because it's operation. There's no changes to your acceleration, your speed, your deceleration, or your position location when you are jogging. So that's it. And then, again, you can turn on and off your brake. You can turn on and off your servo, even without inputting your password. But if I wanted to teach a position, I do need to enter my password. I do not wish to do that, so I will exit by hitting the power button, and that takes me to my next screen, which will take me out of test op mode. And again, back to whatever my initial screen is, either simple velocity setting or AVD setting. If I want to change my password now, I will turn the actuator back on, or turn the digital speed controller back on by hitting enter, and go back to settings mode, and next value. Let me actually turn the volume down a little bit because that is a very annoying beep. Now, if I want to change the password, I have to enter my password. And now it will tell me password setting. So, if I want to completely remove a password and no longer have to type in a password for for any of those position changes, leave it at 0000. And you will see, now I don't have to input any position values. But let's say that I do want to change my password. I had it set to 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to set it to 5, 6, 7, 8. And let's say that I forgot my initial password, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, like I said, if you have a password currently, right? If I have password 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want to change that password, well, I have to enter my password to change my password. If I get my password wrong, it will not let me change my password. Now, do note, if you forget your password, there is a way to reset your password without knowing your previous password. Please reach out to IAI for that information if it becomes relevant. The last thing to note about the digital speed controller that I can't actually show because, well, nothing is actually going wrong when my actuator is moving, this digital speed control display will also show the various alarms that pop up. Now, this is both the actual errors, which will result in your actuator stopping and will disrupt motion, as well as the message level alarms, such as the overload warning threshold, the total travel count warning, and the total travel distance warning. So all three of those are message level alarms. They will not disrupt the operation of the actuator, but they are basically methods to reduce or to prevent any future issues. So, for example, the overload warning as opposed to the overload error says that my motor temperature has increased by a certain value, not enough to give me that full-on error, but my motor temperature has exceeded beyond normal values, and it won't shut down my line. Instead, it will tell me, hey, there's a little problem here. Nothing too serious yet, but you might want to look into it when you get a chance to avoid having to shut down the line in the future. Additionally, your total travel count and your total distance warnings are, again, message level alarms that basically say, I have exceeded a specified total number of movement threshold, or I have moved a certain distance. Both of those are designed to allow you to know when your actuator needs to be greased. But in addition to showing you those and giving you decent descriptions of them as well, it will also show you the various alarms. So for example, when you actually get an overload error, it will show you the full overload error. It will show you a motor error, controller error, internal communication error, and power supply voltage error. All on the little display screen over here. It gives you which error that you are experiencing, and it also gives you little descriptions of things that you can do to resolve the error. So for example, for the overload error, which has shut down your actuator, options are, or things to investigate are removing obstacles, cleaning or greasing the actuator, flattening your mounting plane, or increasing your 24 volt capacity. For the motor error, you can see it is running within the catalog specs, cooling down the motor, making sure that your motor temperature does not exceed 40 degrees Celsius. Or if you've burned out the motor completely, you may need to replace the motor. For a controller error, the options are powering or cycling 24 volts, reducing external electrical noise, or under certain circumstances, you may have to replace the entire controller. If you're experiencing an internal communication error, options are to cycle the 24 volt power, check your cable connections, make sure that everything is stable and connected properly and that there are no breaks in any of the wiring. You can check any replaced parts, reduce electrical noise, or you may have to replace the whole controller. 24 volt supply error, make sure that your incoming power from your power supply is between 21.6 and 26.4 volts. Increase the power capacity or replace the controller. All of these screens and all of the information that I have been giving you, by the way, can be found in the latest versions of the ELECYLINDER slider and the ELECYLINDER rod manuals. Section 4.2 goes through all of this information and will show you little screenshots of those error screens. That's pretty much everything for the digital speed controller. Just as a reminder, this digital speed controller can be used to change positions. That's position location, that's acceleration, deceleration, and velocity. But it cannot be used to change any of your parameters. You cannot use your digital speed controller for continuous operations. You cannot set push moves, but you can run push moves. Please remember your password if you set a password. That is the easiest way to be able to change passwords in the future. That is the easiest way to be able to go into and change anything that you need to change here, as far as your position, location, acceleration, deceleration, velocity. Also keep in mind that the digital speed controller will display all major errors, as well as, again, diagnostic things that you can do to help resolve that error, and also displays message level alarms. So that's pretty much everything about the digital speed controller. I hope that this video has been informative for you, and as usual, if you have any questions, please call up the IAI office. Thank you very much for watching.